Baptiste. Welcome to the Thrive in China podcast. We've known each other for quite some time, particularly in the field of accounting and software systems and ERP systems. And I thought it would be a brilliant idea to bring you on the podcast to share your insights on how things are working in China, but also to share a little bit your journey and what brought you to the APAC region. So I'm terrible at introductions. I'm going to leave you to introduce yourself, a little bit about your background, and what brought you to Asia initially.
Thank you, Christina. I'm happy and honored to be with you for those few minutes. Yeah, so I'm French. I've been in Asia for, I think, 22, 23 years now, across the region. So mostly in Japan, but China, Hong Kong, Singapore, and a few also time spent in other countries across the region. I'm just like you. I've been an entrepreneur. I've had a few businesses over the years, but I've been in the IT business for 10 years, a bit more now.
Mm-hmm.
Originally the business was in Japan. So 10 years ago, a good way to find Japanese speakers that were not as expensive as Japanese employees were in China, because of, still have a lot of speakers especially in Dalian. And so my first encounter with China.
That's actually really interesting. How did you know about that? I mean, how did you know that the cheap Japanese speakers were in Dalian?
History books. No, and then I think at one point in time there were a lot of Japanese companies actually having back offices in Dalian. So you had Fujitsu, NTT, all those big companies, because
that makes
sense. And I think Dalian is well known for having a lot of foreign speaking Chinese good universities. There's a Russian influence, which is funny as well.
Right.
It's a very global.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think it's a global place inside China.
Yeah.
So I found a few partners there. I think it was 2015 or 2014, and started asking them to work for us. But very quickly, in fact, we set up a JV together. So I decided to invest. So I put some money. They put some money, and together we hired a few employees and started working like this. So this was my first experience with working in China and foray.
And Baptiste, maybe you can explain, what does Shearwater do? What do you do?
Okay, so Shearwater and our sister company in Singapore, Pointstar, we sell, support, and implement cloud solutions for large SMBs, so companies around 50 to 500 employees mostly, although we have
in Asia or on a global scale.
Yeah, in Asia. So we do help Chinese companies in China, but Chinese companies in Japan or in Singapore or in Vietnam or in Thailand or in the Philippines, and also in Europe, or during COVID we've done a few Chinese companies in Africa.
Interesting.
A cement company actually chartered a flight for Chinese consultants to actually go and travel all across Africa to do the implementation and train the local staff. So that was an interesting experience as well. Yeah. So we do help a lot of globalizing Chinese businesses when they go abroad as well.
Okay.
And the other way around, we would help as well, companies from Singapore go into China, but also US companies or European or even a lot of Israeli companies come to us, because we offer each country at a regulatory, mandatory requirements we would cover, but also because we can help them across the whole region. And it's relatively difficult to find a company in IT accounting, we can bridge the gaps between the languages and cultures. So
Understand. So it's sort of like
we can-
your outsourced IT provider for APAC.
IT provider will provide the system mostly, and then if the
Okay.
customer require us to actually operate the system, we would help them. Yes.
And is it, I mean, from my perspective, it's been mostly accounting discussions, but what type of systems are you offering?
We have three main systems. The first one would be, yes, accounting, around accounting, but also inventories, let's say project management as well. So if you want to engage or you have an IT project, you need to know how much it will you plan for the cost, because it's
Right.
monthlies, man hours. Then you will bill for those costs. You would have the revenue recognition. Uh, so in China, typically you would have FAPIAO, the golden tax. So
Yes.
you need to issue the invoice to the national tax system.
Yes.
It could be e-commerce. So we have a lot of e-commerce customers as well, where they would sell on websites, but also on WeChat and Alibaba and other platforms. So we would connect those platforms with the ERP, which is
Okay.
Oracle NetSuite, and they would have the inventory would go real time, but the sales would come real time, and the shipment would be done fulfilled immediately, and we would send this back to WhatsApp or whatever platform we use.
Okay.
So this is the first one. Second one is a budgeting planning, where we help mostly large companies or even financial, um, entities like the Bank of the BRICS, for example, to plan for the next few years. So you would have a top-down budget.
Sure.
So company typically would say, okay, next year I want to achieve 1 million in sales, or how
Right.
many widgets do you need to sell,
Right.
and what's the average amount? What happens if I increase a little bit the average price of my widget?
Mm.
And what happens if I hire more salespeople? You would pay more salaries, but they would sell more. So is
Mm.
it better for my profitability or not? So
Mm.
you are able to do top-down budget, but also have simulations of
Simulate.
what.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And then bottom up, which is you ask each
Right.
department heads, okay, what do you think will be your
Your budget.
headcount next year?
Right.
And you want more junior or more senior, and it will all roll up into a big budget, and then you can plan which one you prefer, and you get actuals, so you can compare the actuals with your different simulations and see where you're going. I think it's really interesting because it kind of shifts the conversation in having just accounting data. So you're looking a little bit back in the mirror
Yep.
to looking forward and saying, okay, what happened if,
And
and
being more proactive, right? In
yeah.
case of any type of
So it's like you
circumstance.
drive, you need a map
Yeah,
to kind of know
exactly.
where
It's
you're
a
going.
roadmap. Yeah. Yeah.
So okay,
And your
and the
third
last
one?
one is really more accounting. Sorry, it's
Okay.
just about the financial consolidation attestation. So
Okay.
you have um, your books are there, but how do you make sure that this is matching reality?
Mm.
So if you say there's one big spike into your assets,
Mm-hmm.
so who bought what, when, why,
Mm.
where's the contract,
Mm.
and you can attest that your books
Yes.
are correct.
Yes.
So this is also mostly for public companies.
I see. And you said you started off in Japan, but then actually you set up the joint venture in Dalian and were hiring the people in Dalian. I guess there were software
Yeah,
engineers
yeah,
or
yes,
back end IT guys.
yes.
So how did the business start in China? I mean, was it the JV partner that kicked everything off, or how did you get the ball rolling?
Yeah, long story. So the JV partner actually onboarded a few of their employees into the JV. So we had a few employees to start with, and basically we sent out work from Japan saying, okay, we want you to develop this program. This is the requirement and the documentation. It should work like this, and so on and so on. This worked relatively well for 1 or 2 years, and then we had a number of issues with the JV partner,
Okay.
and yeah, so I think one of the big lesson in China is trust, but still, check. Make
I'm
sure
glad
that
you're saying it. I'm glad you're saying it.
yeah. No, and I'm very trustworthy. I like people, and I like to trust people, and I
Yeah.
mean, give your word, and you trust it, right?
So is it fair to say that the marriage ended in a divorce?
Yeah.
Okay.
So of course we paid money, and everyone is happy at the end of the day. But
Right.
we had to split.
And separate your ways. Yeah.
Yeah.
Understand.
And one big thing I noticed. So I'm not. I mean, I've been in China a few years. Is that over the last. So in 2015 or 16, I think China was still the factory of the world. So the way we that China was really okay. We can be a little bit cheaper and do some work and so on, and it moved to being really a market of its own. It's a second economy in the world. It's huge. It's still um, tons of opportunities everywhere. And so it moved from being a low cost location where you can do work to a market of its own. So it really meant that we had to step up at one point and start to have proper salespeople, proper
A proper
project
foundation.
managers.
I mean, it's a proper
Yeah,
foundation that you have to build, right?
yeah, it becomes proper business. It also
Yeah.
means that then you can no longer be only in Dalian or other locations, but you need to go into the big cities. So
Right.
today we have this in Beijing, Shanghai, and Shenzhen,
Mm-hmm.
because you need to be in those locations. I mean,
Right.
probably more than 50% of the business is done basically in those three cities, and
So
Guangzhou and all the areas.
sure,
But
sure. But those three main ones. So I mean,
yeah,
you went through a bit of a hurdle in your early stages with the joint
yeah,
venture and then splitting up. And I mean, I can relate it to my own story. I think everybody goes through these hurdles, obstacles, roadblocks, whatever you want to call it. I had the same dilemmas of maybe giving a little bit too much trust without properly checking. How I mean, you mentioned to me before we started recording that now China is a machine. You've got over 100 people employed there. It's rolling nonstop. I mean, you're based now in Japan. How do you manage that? What have you built to get that machine rolling? I mean, everybody has day-to-day issues, right? Let's be
yeah.
realistic. But how do you keep the machine rolling remotely? How do you keep the clients happy? How do you manage that?
Um, yeah, no. One big point I think, which is very interesting in China, is that the distance between managers and leaders and employees is a little bit different depending on the country. And um, my experience is that there's big gap in China between the line level and the
Mm-hmm.
managers,
Mm-hmm.
where there's a lot of respect, a lot of polite Chinese is used, and a lot of um, what was that?
It's a hierarchy. It's a proper hierarchy of
Yeah, it's very
respect, right? Of cultural
correct.
respect. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, correct.
You
Zero
you
respect.
you you respect your elders, you respect those that are in
So
higher
yeah.
roles.
It's very it's pretty close to Confucianism, I
Yes.
guess. But it means the other way, that employees and line level employees and managers cannot be too close.
Mm.
If they are too close, then the way the process works starts to break down, and a lot of strange things start to happen. So in fact, we make sure that there is a proper protocol to things, that
Mm-hmm.
managers are managers, and they have a business card, and all the it needs to be visible.
Mm.
Um, and if this is properly managed, I think a lot of Chinese employees are really a good process-oriented mindset, and they would stick to delivering the process. And for managers, because they're at the manager level, they're really also proactive and also creative, not only waiting, but really going at it.
So I love to hear this because I think a lot of people don't have that experience in China where they have managers that are proactive and creative.
Yeah.
Are these, I mean, maybe you can just explain a little bit the profiles just to give people an idea, because, you know, I think there's still a lot of foreign investors out there who think China is cheap, that you don't have to spend a lot of money in terms of headcount, salaries, and all of that. I am assuming that those guys that you're saying are proactive, creative, they are experienced, they are well versed in what they're doing.
Yeah.
And you pay them well. I mean, in order to be able to achieve that type of a result, right?
Yeah.
Can you give a little bit of a profile on that?
Yeah, it's completely true. It's a global level people. I mean, they have global salaries. So
right.
It and you get what you are paying for. So and in a sense, you're buying not a clone, but you're buying time for yourself. So it's really important, I think, not to be skimpy on the manager level, because you will need to spend more time managing the managers than really. So it goes to the second level, which is how to manage the manager to the leadership. And this one, though, I think the distance is very. We are pretty close, so we meet each other relatively frequently. We go for drinks or run or whatever, so we can build the trust and this
and build a relationship. It's a
yeah,
personal relationship at that point, right?
correct.
Yeah.
And I think it's been really important. And so I've had a mentor, in fact, in my Chinese business adventures, and she has been really helpful in helping me understand the viewpoint of the Chinese managers.
I think that's really interesting. Why did you decide to get a mentor? Or what? How did, I mean, I think it's a great initiative. It's one of my biggest regrets that I did not get, I don't know what you want, whatever you want to call it, a mentor, somebody who I could go to bounce ideas off of, that I could, especially as an entrepreneur, you don't necessarily know who you can always go to, right?
Oh yeah.
I think it's fascinating. I think it's great.
I think I don't know. In my case, she chose me more than the other round, so I did not have much choice. She was an employee then of the Chinese business. She was so she spent a lot of time in the US, so she was able to bridge, I think, culturally, and she worked for other foreign companies, so and foreign bosses. So she was able to really to understand both. And being having a little bit more experience, she kind of also knew what was working, what was not working, which type of people were
good,
to avoid,
not good. Yeah,
just to avoid, yeah, and
yeah.
So it's been really useful. I think, yeah.
I always actually say, you know, my role is as a business advisor. I'm advising people on how to get into China, operate in China, scale and grow in China. But my disclaimer is that I'm still a foreigner in China. I don't know everything. My staff know everything. They are the locals. They are trained in their speciality, and I go to them for information and advice, or to back up what I'm saying, or whatever else. And so that's why I like that you said you have a mentor, because I never thought of it in that way, but I also feel like my right-hand person in China is my mentor, is my guide, is my, it's rare to have those. It's wonderful to have them, but I think it's also really important to have them, but also realize, as a foreigner managing a China business, I don't know everything. It's impossible for me to know everything, right?
Yeah. You need to leverage the people around you, right?
Absolutely. And delegate, right? And
yeah.
What
Trust and delegate, yeah.
I mean, one thing is obviously HR issues, but what other challenges have you had in China in terms of growing and scaling the business? I mean, I can imagine now you ventured out. I mean, you were mentioning to me that you've got Chinese global companies heading out into Asia. You've got foreign investors coming into China and Asia. You know, that's a lot to handle in terms of maintenance and customer relationship, right? Have there been any challenges in that development guiding those two groups of clientele?
Well, in our business, we have kind of the same. I guess it's always I think recruiting is always a challenge. So you have ups and downs in activities, and it's always a challenge to. But I found that in China, you do you must be comfortable talking about money, and money is really important for Chinese staff. So I think especially in Europe, we are not. It's kind of something that is hidden, the negotiation, and I think in China it's very transparent. It's very the way people are. How much we value people and how much they are paid, and the bonus incentives need to be very clear, very transparent, and it's applicable to everyone as well. So so I found that this is something that I was not used to, and I did learn a lot on how to set this up so people are invested, but it's not enough. So you need to talk a lot about money, but then it comes back to, okay, is this a good company? Am I happy? Not too much overwork? Is they allow me to work from home and things like this to get good people? So not too different from other mature economies, but you have this money angle that is really important, I think. So this has been difficult.
How have you adapted the remote working policies? Because I assume that during COVID that became more of a, obviously an issue. I don't want to use the word issue, but a change in the company dynamic. How do you manage remote working policies in China? I think that's a big question for everybody at the moment, because there's no law surrounding it. But people are asking for it. They want to maintain the status quo of what they got during COVID, or balance between office and remote. How do you balance that out?
So today we balance, meaning that it's a hybrid. It depends on the project. It depends on the offices. And by the way, right after COVID, we opened an office in Wuhan. So
exciting.
Super timing. No, it's true, because why do you have all those laboratories there? Is that you have a lot of universities, and a lot of young graduates do not really want to go to the big cities, which are really expensive. You're not sure if you can have a job, and so on and so on. So I actually recommend not going to Wuhan and other second-tier cities to find more resources.
And their philosophy is, we're never going in an office.
Oh no, my God, it's dangerous. Yeah. No, you just need to plan for sleeping in the office, just in case. No, we allow people to stay to work from home if they need. They need to say hi to the office once or twice every week. But then depends on the project manager. If the project manager wants to be.
I love that. They have to say hi to the office.
Yeah, you still want to. Not so much in China, but in some countries, sometimes you have issues. You have people on the payroll, then
you have a lot of these issues. I've noticed, having now lived in Europe for some time, it's an issue in Europe now.
Oh, yeah.
It's usually the first question being asked in a recruitment process. What's your remote working policy? It's interesting.
Yeah, okay, that's good. But I still think China is a bit late when you compare to other countries into the work from home movement. I still see that a lot of companies ask us to come on site
Mm-hmm.
because they want to see us working,
Mm-hmm.
which we don't see anymore, I think, in other countries, or very rarely.
Okay.
So that's a difference. So it means that still, in general, the process is still very important.
Yes.
So of course, we want results, but the process also needs to be.
Sure. And people want to see you physically still.
Yeah, and but also I think China has a culture where you, we always ask to be paid a percentage upfront,
Mm-hmm.
and
So that's a really good tip. Why have you done that?
because you need to fight for payment always. That's
So that's still a challenge.
this one is still a challenge. So when
Yeah.
you've done something and you send invoice, you need to go and get the payment as well.
Mm.
So
So you ask usually what is your policy on upfront payment? Is it 30%, 50%? Does it depend on the client?
yeah, it depends on the if it's a long project, 1 year, let's say it's a very long project,
Mm.
it would be a few milestones, and we would
Okay.
be paid a few milestones. If it's a smaller project, we get 50% upfront.
So have you ever stopped a project because you haven't got paid?
Let me think. I think once, and I still one or two projects where they haven't paid the remainder. At the end of the day, what can you do? They got the invoice. They got the
Does it not make
invoice, and
sense to get a lawyer? I mean, does it, I mean, I'm
oh, it
playing
does. It does.
I'm playing devil's advocate, right? I mean, does it
Yeah.
make sense to get a lawyer to get that money, or do you just leave it, or like what's been your philosophy on that?
There are a few elements. If the amount is large and there's no recourse, of course we'll get a lawyer and
Mm.
get paid somehow. What we have as well is there is an existing relationship, and there is something else behind it, and as a condition for the payment, we'll do something more, or they will they need to we get paid in exchange. They have we do additional work or something like this.
Mm. I see.
So we don't want to break the relationship. I mean, if you go to court,
You
the
break the
relationship is
relationship.
over.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. I
So
understand.
I don't. Hopefully, that's not too.
But it's always a sensitive situation, isn't it?
It is, but it is. I think it's part of life of doing business in China.
Mm.
So you probably need a good lawyer as well. Yeah.
I've always felt that so we're both service providers, right?
Yep.
I always have felt that we are non-priority in terms of payments.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
We're always put at the bottom of the list,
Yeah.
although we're the foundation of the business. And obviously, if
Yeah.
you lose us, the foundation disappears, but payment always comes last.
Yeah, but it's
Um,
not the same. Look, if you make widgets and you purchase widgets components, you can still resell the components.
exactly. You can do it for
So
us. It's wasted time. I
yeah,
mean, we basically wasted time, resources, staff,
yeah,
right?
yeah. But
Yeah.
and China is still very much a things economy. Like
Mm.
services is still yeah.
Yeah, it's not a priority. Yeah, it's not a priority.
Mm.
Well, I'll change. I mean, I'll debate on that. I feel like in the bigger cities, services and outsourcing solutions are becoming more of a trend.
Yeah,
I still think that for a lot of Chinese companies, it's not really something, they kind of keep things in-house.
yeah,
We do quite a few internal audits on JVs where the Chinese partners are doing the accounting work themselves, and we just come in to check and verify. Kind of like your attestation software, but we do it physically
yeah,
in person. And they hire new graduates who know the basics of accounting, make very basic mistakes. But
yeah,
our warning is if you're going to grow and scale, that staff member can't keep up. They're not going to know how to manage your books. But that's when then the foreign party has to come in and put their foot down and say, okay, what do we need to make sure we're stable in this regard?
Yeah,
It's the
true.
check. They have to check, right? They need to
True.
check.
But Christina, I think a few companies, Chinese companies, especially global ones, have started to move on, and they think
Yeah,
companies
but
in Israel or really high tech, and they
yeah,
say, okay, I want this to be able to 10x,
yeah.
and they start building the processes very early on. So I've seen this in tech, like company with
Okay.
ByteDance or this kind,
Yeah.
but also now in the new electric vehicle companies, where
Okay.
you see that they really think that they will have high growth, and they're not afraid putting investment into technology or training people or
So that's a positive development then. I mean, that's something
yeah,
that's
very good, very good. Yeah,
good to see, right, for the future.
definitely.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm not. There's a lot of doom and gloom about China now, but I think it's the if the economy grows rapidly, everyone wins. I think this is probably over, but there will still be a lot of winners in China, both foreign
Mm,
companies but also Chinese companies.
mm.
Um, so you need to make your pick and pick the good ones. But definitely, I can see that there's a lot of. I mean, I don't know if you remember the first time you paid electronically WeChat. For me, it was blew my mind a bit.
Yes, yes.
The first EV electric vehicle for me was a taxi in China,
Mm-hmm.
I think in Shenzhen, and all the taxis were already electric.
Mm-hmm.
Like everyone was, wow, a Tesla is so cool, but you could see so many already in China.
Yes, yes.
Um, so you can see that
Yeah.
there is an angle where it's really modern and really trying, and
Yes.
and those companies are trying really to move out
To move
into.
forward. Yeah.
Yeah,
And modernize, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. But I think the dilemma in China is that the government or the government offices, I don't want to say the government's mindset, the physical government offices are still so old-fashioned in the ways of doing things, reporting, that
Mm,
companies are stuck in the past, that a lot of
mhm.
their corporate governance and IT or even, accounting aspects are stuck behind. They can't get
Yeah,
updated
yeah, yeah.
because the government is not updating themselves. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
and
Yeah,
for me,
everything is done
that's
on electronically, but you need a piece of paper with a big stamp, and the stamp is
exactly.
so big. So,
Everything now is
yeah,
e-fapiao, is electronic fapiaos, but you still have to print out every single fapiao and file it and voucher it, and it's still the old-fashioned
yeah, yeah.
system.
Or go to the bank and
You physically
thing,
go
and
to
you
the
say,
bank. Exactly,
um,
exactly.
yeah,
So I always think that there's this modernization coming, but I'm in the administrative space, and in the administrative space, there's still blockages that are preventing us from moving
yeah.
forward. And that's also a challenge for every company because
Christina,
what
those are also opportunities. So, one thing we
I
started selling in China as well is the OCR. So
yeah,
you send through email or you take a picture, and it will digitize and
yes.
put it directly into your accounting system or thing like this. And
Well, those are things that are up and coming, but
yep.
the reporting to the government is still very old fashioned. Those things
Oh,
can
really?
help
Yeah,
the internal processes, but the actual reporting that
yeah,
has
yeah.
to happen is still in the old fashioned way.
You still need
Um,
print it on paper and
yeah,
store
you
it
still you
somewhere
still
in
need
a
file
cabinet.
cabinets. You still need the
Yeah,
traditional
yeah.
files
Mm.
and a lot of paper. Um, what in I mean, we've talked quite a few about different challenges in terms of HR and HR management and bureaucracy behind a lot of things with the government. What have been your successes? Because I do want to end these podcasts on, what's been your overall. It's been a journey. It's been a 10-year journey. It's developed so well, but what have been one or two of your biggest successes? I mean, you mentioned
Um,
you opened a
yeah,
new office in Korea. I mean, I just
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm really happy that we are Chinese enough that we do deal with a lot of Chinese companies
mhm,
and entities, and we help them in China but also abroad.
mhm,
Um, um, it's yeah, a company opening a new, so recently factories in Vietnam and Thailand, things
mm,
like this, or even Mexico, they will come to us to
mhm.
help them there. So with their IT infrastructure.
Yeah,
So I can see that we are really a Chinese company. We are an Asian company. We cover, but we do China. In fact, if I had known it a little bit earlier, I would have gone all in into the Chinese market. And early on, because it was like offshore development center, I was not focusing on China itself. Um, but I missed we missed I think a lot of opportunities. We could have been much bigger today. So
but that in itself might have caused more challenges because,
yeah, possibly, yes.
Right.
It's always
at least you got to know the market first.
yeah, and we are doing a good job. I mean, we win awards, relatively frequently. We're growing. So the company itself is I think is in a good position and successful. Then for me, success in China was also to have a lot of a good time. I don't know, in Xi'an, looking at the terracotta warriors and things like this. It's also really, really interesting.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely looking forward to continue this journey in China.
Have you been able to go back since the borders have opened up?
Not recently.
Not recently.
Yeah.
People are taking their time.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's also COVID's open, the borders are open, so everything is kind of come rushing in, right? So it's hard to find the time to venture.
So it kind of had the opposite effect on me, where I'm mostly stuck home because we're having more and more Zoom conversations, and it's difficult to find the time
to travel.
Yeah. Anyway.
Well, Baptiste, I want to end the podcast on a question that I'm asking all of my people that I'm interviewing. So the question is, if you could give yourself one piece of advice on the day you started your China journey, what would it be?
One piece of advice. Don't be shy.
Interesting.
So don't be shy even if you think it's too late, go all in, try to learn the language, try to go to new places, do new things. It's really still a growing economy. So I mean, you won't regret it for sure. So go all in, don't be shy. Yeah. And
when you say don't be shy, you mean just go up to people?
Yeah, but also invest into the country, develop a business. You have a new idea, do it. It's still pretty much a go get it attitude. So if you're not too big, I think you can do a lot of interesting things in China.
Yeah. Well, Baptiste, I want to thank you so much for joining. It's been such a pleasure. Also catching up personally again.
Yeah.
After quite some time. And we will see you soon. And I'm going to provide your company details in the show notes, so people can reach out to you in case they've got any questions or just want to reach out as well.
Awesome, Christina.
Right.
Happy to have a chat, and looking forward to catching up shortly.
Take care.
Thank you. You too. Bye bye.